Very good. Right. Well, as you gather, I'm Bill Breakell. I used to work for the North York Moors National Park. First of all, oh, this dates me, doesn't it? In 1975, and I worked for them for 5 years, and then led various heritage and interpretation regeneration schemes up and down the UK, from Scotland down to the Midlands and the South Pennines, and then came back to the North York Moors National Park in 1990 as what was then the first person with the responsibility for tourism in a national park. Dreadful. But in 1997, the new Labour government set up tourism task forces, one of which was on sustainable tourism. So I joined that, and also was invited to be a member of the government's tourism forum. So that's the background. I've been around, done a lot of things, and ended up back in North Yorkshire since I retired 20 years ago. So that's okay, isn't it? Anyway, let's kick off. Yeah, the Moorsbus network. A long and winding road and an uphill struggle at various times. So just to outline the presentation, I'm going through 4 points: how Moorsbus works, the nuts and bolts, where we've come from, the history of it, what we've hit in terms of obstacles along the way, and whether we've overcome them or dodged them, and then have we learnt anything? Probably I wouldn't do it this way if we're back in 45 years ago, but there we go. Anyway, how Moorsbus works. I should add that all the photographs for these chapter headings are of an event in the North York Moors National Park just under a month ago, which was very car orientated. Anyway, how Moorsbus works. Well, the nuts and bolts. First of all, we're a not-for-profit community interest company, so we're just a bunch of amateurs. We're passenger-led, very strongly passenger-led, but we don't have any continuity of funding, so everything's got to be done on a year-to-year basis. So that's why I've got furrowed brows and I have sleepless nights. Anyway, what are we? We're probably a sort of rural franchise. We start with people and their views, and the illustration on the right is our physical survey forms that are on every bus every day and are handed out by drivers, by volunteers, by myself and the other KIC directors. So using that information, we start to develop and design our routes. I'll come back to the principle of a network shortly, but routes are obviously key. We design them. We also then go through the graft of writing timetables, which are more complicated than they need to be, because we try and make as many connections, safe connections, as we possibly can. We've got to bear in mind drivers' hours and rest periods, where drivers can take their breaks, etc. So routes, timetables, fares. We specify the fare structure for the Moorsbus network. We do the branding, and we specify what types of buses, the seating capacity, whether it's 33 seats or 72, double or single decker. We do have low bridges and low hanging trees, so double deckers can't go everywhere. And also vehicle length. We have tight bends and humpback bridges. So they're some of the key things we need to talk about. Rural franchising, yes. Well, we seek tenders from local regional bus operators, and there aren't an awful lot of them. That takes a fair bit of effort. And simultaneously, we seek funding from key bodies, and we'll come on to who funds and who doesn't fund in a few minutes. So the contracts are let on a gross cost basis. That means that the bus company invoices us usually every month for what they're going to charge us, less income that's taken on the bus. So it's less fares, less concessionary reimbursement, less any top up from the £3 maximum fare, and donate ticket income, which again I'll come back to later. But that means that Moorsbus carries the revenue risk, so the bus operators don't carry the risk. Well, what do we do then? Well, we start to promote and monitor and troubleshoot the services. We promote through printed timetables. We've got at the moment 30,000 in circulation, and we probably will have to have a reprint later on in the season. Distribution is always a difficulty, but we try and get them out where they need to be. We have a website. We have posters, including ones at bus stops. We have a lot of added value and other promotion products, such as donate tickets. Now, I mentioned these before. A donate ticket is a way of somebody getting on the Moorsbus and saying, I'd like to donate to this. Especially important when it's a pass holder who's been travelling for free or perceived to be for free. So we can sell them a £2, £5 or £10 donate ticket, which enables them to get a receipt from the ticketing machine. The money comes straight to the Moorsbus Community Interest Company, but it's seen to be legitimate and it's legal. And it's been copied elsewhere up and down the country. We then have a loyalty scheme called More Rewards. So anybody with the Friends of Moorsbus card shows it and gets 20% at some outlets as a discount. Maybe a free cup of coffee here, or a piece of cake with their cup of tea there. A whole range of offers, including 10% discount on accommodation at certain places. We promote linear walks from bus and train, called Walk and Ride. We do art on the bus, or we did in the past, which was a joint scheme with an artist who worked in a number of media, but we had the video on the bus, which was a bit of a dilemma. Shouldn't people be looking through the windows at the stunning countryside? But we had the video on the bus, we had postcards, and there was a linked exhibition at the Inspired by Gallery in Danby. Follow the band. There's a brass band event later on this year, where about I think there are 4 or 5 bands playing different venues, and our buses will be able to link in with them, and we will publicise that. So get on the bus and follow the band. We do a whole range of publications. Some of them are on the right there. We do a monthly news sheet called Moorsbus. We do days out leaflets from about 20 different locations, giving people a really simple, holding their hand. You'll get this bus from this stop, ask the driver for this, and it really takes people by the hand to build passenger confidence. We've done a children's book called Morris the Moorsbus, and we do my Moorsbus story, where we invite travellers to write up their exploits of the day and put them on the website. And we sell backpacks and pens and a little bit of paraphernalia like that. So what else do we do? Well, we monitor, and that's keeping in touch with drivers during the operational day. So there might be diversions due to roadworks or accidents, maybe late running, lost passengers. Well, she was supposed to be at this rather remote location on the moors. She's not there. Where is she? So we talk those things through, and it's also to give confidence to the drivers, because quite often they're urban drivers from driving the streets of Hull or Darlington. Sometimes they're a bit unsure of the countryside, although drivers do get out and herd sheep off the road, and on odd occasions have rendered first aid to a sheep that was not looking too well. It all worked out all right on the night. We troubleshoot when things go wrong. That's reassuring passengers to retain their confidence, and we make executive decisions in the field. We might, if the worst comes to the worst, have to truncate the service at one point, put out as many messages as we can that we've done that. But generally speaking, we ensure that the last service of the day to get people home is functioning. As I said, passengers are strongly in the driving seat. We do annual surveys, both on board and online, to collect what I've called the 5 Vs. So information on the visitor, their demographics, car ownership, disability, group size, postcode, how many journeys they've taken, visit origins of today's journey, the main purpose of it, information sources used, and then we ask for a quality assessment, which is usually pretty good, but if there's a low mark, we need to investigate that. We look at value, what do passengers spend whilst they're out with us, and their views. We have a free text comments, so we get quite a lot of information, a whole range of people write in with positive comments, negative comments, suggestions, even, 12 people got on in Moulton, 7 got off at Pickering, 3 more boarded, really detailed things. But those are the 4 Vs. The 5th one is volume, but we don't count that in any other way than using the ticketer bus ticket machine on each bus, which we can interrogate that information as well. So we're asking passengers to be part of us. There's a warning with our survey results. It's a slippery road because passengers who fill in survey forms are self-selecting. They've chosen to send a form in either electronically or physically. So self-selecting means that we're probably not delving as deeply or as thoroughly as we would like to do. 2025, we had just over 800 passengers who took over 2,000 journeys. 59% were from a household without a car. So that's in terms of inclusion of people without a car, very high figure. 23% had a health or disability issue. 58% said Moorsbus reduced their social isolation, and 67% said that their health was improved. And 95% inevitably gained pleasure from enjoying the countryside. Passengers spend just over £14, mainly in small establishments in some of the deeper rural areas, so that's quite important. We sense that the spend is higher than that because if somebody doesn't fill that part of the form in, we count it as they didn't spend any money, whereas it might be just reluctance to actually own up to spending £3.25 on a nice cup of coffee and £4 on a nice cake. So we listen to passengers, asking them to be part of us. So every operational day, the KIC directors travel on every bus, talking to passengers and drivers. Friends of Moorsbus, there are volunteers within that, and they're an extra channel for feedback. Our volunteers arrange social events like coffee mornings, and they will sell jams and chutneys and cordials at various events to raise the profile and raise a few pounds at the same time. Volunteers distribute timetables and posters, very, very important because we cover such a huge area. They also assist lost passengers and lost drivers, which has been known. And as I say, sell jams and cordials. So we've become known as the friendly bus amongst a few people. So where we've come from, this is a snapshot of history, the backstory. The people on the right, the 3 on the left are the community interest company directors. The 2 figures on the right, who are taller than everybody else, they've not been worn down quite as much, but the one on the far right is Ross Hamilton, who was a publicist for the United Bus Company in the 1980s. And next to him is John Austin. He was a National Bus Company senior management trainee based at United in Darlington. For a couple of weeks one summer, in fact 1979, he was seconded to Loftus in East Cleveland. And at the same time, his future father-in-law came up to visit and brought a car. Now, John didn't drive at the time, so he enjoyed sitting in the passenger seat and going over the moors on this road. And he thought, wouldn't that be brilliant for a bus company to operate a service there? So 1979 was a good year for MBC finances, and the management gave the go-ahead for a tentative scheme called Moorsrider in 1980. And the following year, 1981, i.e. 45 years ago, Moorsbus came along. So where is it? Well, that's the North York Moors, the conurbations to the top of Darlington, Stockton, Middlesbrough, Redcar. Way off to the bottom right of the map is Hull and Humberside. Bottom left would be York and then West Yorkshire. So that's our patch. These are some of the routes that we operate. These are the ones we operate at the moment, in fact. There are areas of deprivation, particularly the Teesside, followed by Scarborough, and of course the Hull area. Very high deprivation indices. We have in the middle a very sparse population, more sheep than people. We have a limited road network. Some of them are far too narrow now for vehicles. I run vehicles on them, usually 16 to 22 seat vehicles on some of the roads, but other traffic now has got so big, SUVs, etc., that those roads are no longer suitable, and certainly not for our full-size vehicles. We also cover long distances from the start points from Darlington to Pickering, which is one service, is 67 miles. So we've developed a network. One service in 1980, 1981, through an incremental improvement of connectivity. So we ended up with that in 2022, and this is this year's network, which covers a fair bit of the North York Moors and its surrounding area, and the Howardian Hills national landscape. But the National Park Authority got involved, and the reasons why it got involved when I was there was national parks, and I feel very strongly, are for all, regardless of wealth and social class, as the original legislation said. I did a resident survey, and when asked what were the disbenefits from tourism, way above everything else, it wasn't litter, it wasn't visitors themselves, it was traffic. It was going too fast, too slow, in the wrong place at the wrong time, filling up car parking spaces, parking on verges, a whole range of things, but traffic was the major disbenefit according to local people. At the same time, Rosie Simpson from the Peak National Park at the time wrote a piece for Europark on loving them to death. Again, it was the early days of sustainable tourism. So the National Park Authority here saw it as part of an integrated transport system. So it helped funding. It, in the early days, provided, I think it was £5,000 per year to help marketing, but then progressively, particularly when I got back on the scene in 1990, we took over the full design, organisation, operation of Moorsbus, to an extent of probably £250,000 per annum was being invested into the bus services, and that's a long time ago. So the concept developed slowly. I recognise that visitors graze here. They don't go to one particular attraction. So they'll start in the morning with perhaps a cup of coffee and then go for a little stroll, pub lunch at lunchtime, and then maybe visit a historic attraction or a museum, then have afternoon tea somewhere. So they're moving around the area. So developing Moorsbus, we want to try and replicate that grazing pattern across the North York Moors. We're also very much aware of the needs for access from the surrounding urban areas. Many of them had a historic connection with the North York Moors. So for instance, the Teesside, it was an awful lot of farmers who had actually deserted the North York Moors and gone to work in the steel industry of Teesside. So there were links, but we also recognise the high deprivation in those areas. There was a North Yorkshire County Council policy that they would not fund Sunday services, evening services, or leisure services. So by operating on a Sunday, we were trying to fill that gap and ensure that the national park was still accessible for people who didn't have a car. We recognise that rural bus services can't be self-sufficient from fares, and the impact of the car threatens peace and tranquility and natural beauty. Well, I did that as a response to North Yorkshire erecting signage at Saltergate on the A169, and I thought most of the signing was inappropriate, so that was my Christmas card to North Yorkshire at the time. But it became what at the time was, I suppose, a national success story. We were citing reports from the Cabinet Office, DFT, DCMS, Countryside Commission, tourist boards, and we operated from places, Peterlee in the far north and Goole, 140 miles apart. So you'll see the coverage that we tried to attain. And we operated every weekend from March to October and daily during the school holidays. As I said, the National Park Authority invested very heavily, and we linked other policies. So the car parking policies were such that if you parked in one of the national park car parks, your ticket, probably £3 at the time, gave you £3 off the Moorsbus fare. So we linked people who parked their cars with using the Moorsbus. I also, with Oxford Brookes University, concocted a scheme. It was also worked with the RAC on this. It was a tentative scheme that sounded great in principle, because we wanted to ensure that people spent as long as they possibly could in a car park. Their car was safe from vandalism, theft, or whatever else. It was off the road. It wasn't cluttering up the roads. So the suggestion was that if people stayed for a full day, it would be free. Pay on exit if they stayed for 3 hours. Well, perhaps there was a couple of quid. If they stayed for 1 hour, it was £4. If they stayed for 30 minutes, it was £5. So basically, it was the inverse of normal car parking charges. But 2013, the National Parks axed Moorsbus. Those that work for national parks will think that, yes, 2013 wasn't a good year for funds from DEFRA and the government, but the North York Moors decided that green transport policies should be dropped in favour of the car. I ought to explain that one of my other pastimes is volunteering for the National Trust at one of their properties, and so when I'm doing car park duties, I park all the red cars together in one place and all the blue cars together somewhere else. Sometimes I do it on number plates or type of vehicle, but I said I was a boring soul, didn't I? Anyway, Moorsbus was axed, so local action to the rescue. 3 members of the Northern Rydale Public Transport Group, who now happen to be the Community Interest Company directors, tried to safeguard the ethos of Moorsbus. Not-for-profit Community Interest Company was established and Friends of the Moorsbus. So in 2014, we scrapped it around and got enough money to run one Moorsbus for a short season. So over the forthcoming 12 years, slow growth. Funding from various sources, parish and town councils, donations from passengers, a little bit of money from organisations such as District Council. And there's one-off time-limited funds. So TransPennine Express, they provided 3 years of funding to introduce an additional bus that called at some of their stations and brought people into the national park. The Prince's Trust, Land of Iron, they contributed as well. All services designed by volunteers, but no funding from the North York Moors National Park Authority. So in principle, at the time, we felt we were helping with social well-being, health and equity benefits. supporting the local economy, particularly smaller places off the beaten track, and protecting the environment. All those things again: climate change, air quality, noise, accident risk, congestion, community severance. And we're doing it hopefully to put a marker down for future generations. Well, we've hit a few obstacles along the way, as you can see in that illustration there. First of all, we're a deep rural area with very limited road networks and frequent closures. This was a closure in Rosedale that affected our M6 service for 2 years. The diversionary route was 21 additional miles, so you can see how that impacted on our services. Volatility of demand. You know what the weather's been like over the last few days, and what it's been like earlier on, not too good. It's not just the weather, it's the Friday evening weather forecast that is really critical. If the weather forecaster in the studio, particularly a local weather forecaster, says it's going to be a lousy weekend, people won't catch the bus. If they say it's going to be nice, they might. Volatility of demand is also led by lots of other extraneous factors, which are probably too diverse to debate now. One of the issues that we've found is an obstacle is that the surrounding urban centres are in different regions for politics. So, for instance, the north, we've got Ben Howsham, who's the Conservative mayor for the Tees Valley Combined Authority. In the south, Humberside and East Yorkshire has got Luke Campbell, who's a Reform mayor for that Combined Authority. And in the middle, the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority has a Labour mayor, David Scaife. So we have issues with the 3 different political parties involved as the mayors of the Combined Authorities. And also that affects media. In the past, when I was sending press releases out, I had to think, well, what are people reading in the Tees Valley? What are people reading in York? What are they reading in West Yorkshire or East Yorkshire? So we do have issues about the geography of the area. But also there are no locally based bus operators. In the past there were, fairly small, but they leased vehicles that met our standards, but slowly they've either gone out of business, sometimes as a result of very low reimbursement rates from the local authority, according to one of the operators. And elsewhere, they've just been swallowed up by larger operators, or sometimes when it's been a family business, the older people have decided to call it a day, and none of the children or grandchildren have taken on board. So there are no locally based bus operators. But the main thing is a lack of long-term funding. So we've got last-minute negotiations, no chance for real proper advanced publicity. And as I said, no national park support. National park support. So who does pay? Well, onboard fares and pass reimbursement are key. And then we get grants from North Yorkshire Council, the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, East Riding of Yorkshire Council, Hull City Council, the Howardian Hills National Landscape, parish councils who find it difficult, but they will contribute £500 or £600, and passenger donations, through our donate ticket in particular. But as I said, nothing from the National Park Authority, not a pound. So have we learnt anything? Yeah, first of all, we've learnt that passengers really want those 5 C's. Confidence. So quite often our users are new to the area. Sometimes they don't know how to pronounce places like Sleights, which is spelled Sleights, or other places like that. Hutton Bushel, it's Hutton Buskell, according to the way it's spelt. So people who are new to the area don't have confidence, and they also don't have the Get You Home service. They don't have the friend on the end of a phone saying, "Oh, I've missed the last bus. Will you come and rescue me?" So there are those people. There are also people who are new to buses, or perhaps returning after 30, 40, 50 years of not having ridden on a bus after the school bus. We have overseas visitors, sometimes, particularly from York Station or elsewhere. They're there and they don't really understand the bus etiquette. What do you mean, hail a bus? What's hailing a bus? I mean, in Germany, buses don't stop at proper bus stops. So if you're standing on the top of the moors and you hail a bus, well, it's unknown for some overseas visitors. A lot of elderly passengers need confidence. One of the things about that is that our older passengers who've been using the service for many, many years are sadly now developing dementia. So there's even greater need for us to provide the confidence, and the next one, which is continuity. Very important that people don't see that we're changing things unless there's a really good reason for change. Connectivity, most important. We think that that is really important because particularly in rural areas, most bus services need to link as passengers. Journey patterns are quite complicated. You don't just get one bus from A to B. You're normally getting a bus from A to B, changing onto another bus from B to C, and possibly even a fourth bus. So it is complicated. So connectivity is important. And I know that there's always this thing of making sure it's a sort of a cheek-to-cheek connection straight away. We feel connectivity is slightly more complex than that. What about misconnections? What about the time for a toilet call? Cost? Well, we think that cost is important. Some of the schemes, such as the £3 maximum fare and potentially kids go free in August, do help people to realise that it isn't expensive to travel by bus, and an awful lot of our passengers have got the English National Concessionary Travel Scheme pass. And communications. Well, communications, we believe strongly, is two-way. We listen and we explain, or we try and explain. So communications is very important. Again, have we learnt anything? Well, life's complicated, and running a bus service is a bit of an uphill struggle. Perhaps we lack focus. Have we got too many routes? Even though they did come about as this principle of people graze. But maybe too many routes, maybe too many added value projects. We don't qualify for charitable status because we run buses, and that, according to the Charity Commission, doesn't enable us to have charitable status. So it means we can't carry money over as a charity would without losing some of it in corporation tax. And where's the courage from politicians? They're obviously very wary about telling people, no, abandon your car and go by bus, and we'll support buses. Perhaps they don't understand that widening the road is only going to generate more traffic. Increasing car park capacity are only going to increase more traffic. And of course, the other thing is electric vehicles. Well, they aren't really the answer, because if every national park sees continued use of EVs, are we going to build wider roads, more car parks? Will people be travelling faster? Will the accident risk increase? So, it is much more complicated than just saying, well, the answer to all our issues is electric vehicles. No, it's not. What else have we learned? Well, as I said, confidence, and it's the key to connectivity. Networks aren't networks if they don't connect. And as I said, cheek-to-cheek connections or a short break. If you sat on a bus for an hour and a half, coming all the way from Hull up to Pickering, you need a bit of a break. You might need a toilet break. You might need just to stretch your legs. So we're building in breaks, perhaps 10 minutes at these places, which does allow to catch up with vehicles that have got behind schedule due to perhaps traffic congestion. But that, we feel, is important. It's frustrating for some, but in the overall picture of things, I think that is quite important. Connecting two or more buses needs a long bus lay-by and long bus borders. They're the raised bits to get on a vehicle, perhaps with a wheelchair, or just with people with limited mobility. We have 18 rail stations on the Moorsbus network that we either call at or very close to. We can't connect at all of those. We do fairly well with some of them, but we can't physically write a timetable unless we've got a 15-minute service on all our routes that would enable us to connect with rail service into the area. Lots of things we've learned. Yeah, carrying capacity. Last year we had a double deck from Hull, 72 seats, full and standing room by the time it had left Hull. So we left people behind in Beverley, left people behind in Driffield, and all the way up. That doesn't do any good for confidence, does it? So we do look at carrying capacity and how we cope with full buses. Bike spaces, we have bike spaces on the double decker, but we can't guarantee them. So it would be rather foolish if you took your bike on the bus all the way from Hull to Danby and then found that somebody else had nabbed it on the way back, and you would end up having to cycle the 67 miles back. Not much fun. Small vehicles aren't the answer as far as we're concerned, because we did it one year have a 16-seat minibus as part of the network. Well, when we got to the 16-seat taken and we had to leave somebody behind, that was not on. You only get 16 seats on a 16-seater, whereas our 33-seater will take the same number of people standing, so we can increase that capacity. It's not comfortable, but it does mean that we can get 70 plus people on most of our vehicles, and on the decker we can probably get 100 people legitimately. There's a lack of understanding from the highways and planning authorities. You know, they don't really think that bus borders or bus stops or bus shelters are important, and they're probably wedded to car travel still. And the lack of bus stop infrastructure is you know, classic. Our terminus, the top right picture there, is Helmsley. Neither of those buses can access a curb that's anything more than about 2 inches high. So to physically manoeuvre somebody in a wheelchair off a bus in Helmsley is very difficult. It's a terminus not only for our buses, but also the service bus on a daily basis between Helmsley and Scarborough. Lack of infrastructure is really, really dreadful. We actually paid for bus stops and raised borders to serve the Danby Lodge National Park Centre. So we actually did a particular fundraising campaign and went out to 1 or 2 charities to try and raise the funding. The Park Authority didn't think it was important, but we did. Well, finally, reimbursement. We get very low rates for a concessionary pass use. So, for instance, people travelling from, let's just say, York to Danby on the M6, which is, let's just see how far that is. That's 53 miles. We get reimbursement for somebody who uses their free bus pass of £1.30 for that length of journey. We think that that's very low, but the system doesn't enable us to do anything other than accept what is given. The £3 maximum fare top-up is near impossible to achieve. And if we do get anything, it's likely to be 50p or £1. The reason for that is that our services, as I said, are lengthy, and our fares would normally be quite high for that. Relatively high, I'm saying, you know, £4 or £5. But the other bus operators who are running urban services, which the £3 maximum fare system is based on, most of their fares are below £3. So we get very poor reimbursement rates for that. And the details of the Kids Go Free in August scheme is unknown at the moment. We'll probably be under pressure to accept, but we'll probably just make a loss on it. Integrated tickets and timetables may be anti-competitive. We have to negotiate with the Competition and Markets Authority just to make sure that we are let off the accusation that we've been anti-competitive through integrated tickets and timetables, a rather silly system. And our Swiss wish is, yes, we'd love to see hourly interconnecting timetables between bus and train. We had a person who worked really hard and worked out a scheme for the North Yorkshire and York area, and that was brilliant. It was a tentative scheme, and we've done some more work in our particular neck of the woods, but that's what passengers want. It gives them the confidence and the connectivity that they demand. The comment that came back last year was, bus makes sustainability happen, and Moorsbus makes sustainability happy. That was one of our visiting Chinese academics up at Teesside Business School, I think she was, but she volunteered a lot of her time with us, really very, very helpful. Well, I feel strongly that bus services should be fair, frequent, and I'm not suggesting every 15 minutes on some of our moorland roads, but we should be thinking of an hourly frequency is the minimum for most of our network. So frequent, accessible both physically to enable people with any disability to get on board, accessible in terms of the fare structure, and accessible in terms of how it's explained. Mental accessibility is very important. It must be integrated. As I said, so many rural journeys are more than one bus. So it's got to be integrated, it's got to be joined up, and it's got to be reliable. We do have breakdowns, we've had breakdowns before, and they will continue, but we do need to work hard. One of our problems with providing reliable vehicles is that invariably, if there is a problem, as there was with one of our vehicles losing some coolant on Sunday, it happened to break down 52 miles away from its depot. And the driver did manage to nurse it back, but the problem with having bus companies that are supplying buses from a great distance is we don't have an engineer just around the corner. We do need more reliable vehicles. So that's it, be part of us. Thanks from, we're just a bunch of amateurs when all's said and done. Yeah, we could go far together. So there we go.
Going to move on to some questions now. So do you want to stop recording, Nick? So you can either put your questions in the chat or you can put your hand up and say it out loud. It's up to you. We're stopping recording.